Hello, everybody. This is part 2 of A Taste of Chicken Soup for the Cat Lover's Soul. So I'm more than halfway done with the book, so let's get into it. The second part of the story is entitled Elvis Has Left the Building. He had been my best friend and companion for more than 12 years. A first-year anniversary present for my husband when I told him I wanted something soft and warm to take care of. He had been with me through several jobs, earthquakes, fires, the LA riots, and 5 or 6 moves to different apartments. He was my surrogate child, my baby, my pal, and my protector when my husband was working late. He took care of me, followed me everywhere, and loved me unconditionally. So when the veterinary surgeon told me that my beloved cat Elvis would die within a few weeks, I was devastated. I had just become pregnant with my first child, and I so badly wanted my baby to know Elvis and come to love him as much as my husband and I did. It had happened so quickly. One week, my husband and I noticed that our usually healthy and robust black and white cat was rapidly losing weight. After a few more days passed, we noticed a distinct loss of energy, and we took Elvis to be examined. Finding an abnormality in the blood, the vet referred us to a wonderful internal medicine group for animals. There, Elvis suffered through a battery of tests, which eventually determined his fate. He had a rare form of mast cell cancer that was untreatable, but that didn't stop him from befriending the receptionists and lab technicians who grew quickly to love him. Whenever we would come to pick him up, we could hear them in the back yelling, "Elvis has left the building." As the weeks went on, the doctor taking care of Elvis left it to us to decide how to proceed. We decided to try anything we could to keep Elvis alive and to give him a chance to fight. That meant spending more than $5,000 and coming in 2 to 3 times a week to give Elvis blood transfusions and chemotherapy, none of which guaranteed his recovery. But we had to try. At night, Elvis slept cuddled up in bed near us. He was so gaunt and weak that he needed our body heat to stay warm, and he would press his head against my arm as if to say, "Stay close." During the days he was home, he would lie on the couch and sleep, occasionally raising his head and giving me his trademark meow, a strange nasal "ma." As the baby inside me grew bigger, Elvis grew weaker, and my husband and I realized he was losing his battle with cancer. It was January, and my baby was due in March. If only Elvis could hold on a little longer. But as the month wore on, it was obvious the chemo was not working. Elvis had lost more than half of his body weight and he could barely move. His blood levels were dangerously anemic. The doctor didn't even think he could handle another transfusion. So on a cold day at the end of January, my husband and I carried Elvis back to the doctor's office one final time. In what seemed like a surreal dream, we were led through the surgery area to a room in the back called the grieving room. It was a peaceful, friendly room with a couch and curtains designed to make a painful process a little more comfortable. We were given a half hour to say our final goodbyes. Then the doctor came in, said a prayer for Elvis, and injected a syringe into a vein. As I felt my friend, my beloved Elvis, go limp in my arms, I held him close to my huge belly, hoping that maybe part of his spirit would go into my unborn child. It was a silly fantasy, but it kept me going long enough to leave the office without crying, until I hear one of the lab techs sadly say, "Elvis has left the building." The receptionist was crying, and as she hugged me, I broke down in tears. It took a few weeks before I could get through the day without weeping. Reminders of Elvis were everywhere. But as March approached, my focus turned to my upcoming C-section. Our little boy Max was about to make his appearance into the world. My husband and I had picked out his name, Maxwell Gordon Jones, and on March 19th, as scheduled, he was born, big and bouncy and healthy. During Max's first night in the hospital, he made all kinds of strange baby noises, including a very distinct nasal "ma." My husband and I gasped, staring at each other. Could it be? We laughed as we pondered the idea that our child had somehow absorbed Elvis's spirit. And when Max napped next to me in the bed, I melted when he pressed his head into my arm as if to stay close. When we filled out the birth certificate, we decided to add a little something special to Max's name. Maxwell Gordon Elvis Jones. Now, 6 months later, Max acts more and more like the feline brother he will never meet. Loving, affectionate, and cuddly, and this comforts me. I took Max grocery shopping recently. As I stood in line, holding him in my arms, I noticed a tabloid headline and I had to laugh. It read, "Elvis lives." No kidding, I thought, and squeezed my son and kissed him on the cheek. This story was by Marie D. Jones. This next story is called Conversation with a Cat. About 8 years ago, my girlfriend Gail and I bought a cabin in Flagstaff, Arizona to use as a summer getaway. The cabin needed extensive renovation, so during that first summer while Gail worked in Tucson, where we lived at the time, I traveled to Flagstaff for a week or so each month to make the necessary repairs. One warm afternoon while I was working on the deck, I heard a meow. Looking up, I saw a half-grown cat standing 30 or 40 feet from me near our woodpile. I figured she was one of the feral cats that lived in the area. Studying her for a minute, I meowed back. Encouraged, the cat meowed again. I replied briefly, wondering what we were saying to each other. A few more meows were exchanged before she finally skittered off into the woods. She obviously enjoyed our conversation because she came back. Every day that week I saw her running through the yard or sunning herself in a protected spot near the woodpile. I have always had a soft spot for cats. We had 2 at home in Tucson, and so I began to leave food out for her. If I was around, she wouldn't go near it, but if I was inside, she'd come and lick the bowl clean. I tried holding food out to her in my hand, but it was too frightening for her. She needed her space, so I gave her a wide berth. Something about this particular cat touched me. I wanted to convince her to let me pet her. I could see that a whole person was just too much for her to handle. So, while she ate her dinner on the porch, I put some cat food on my fingers, lay down on the floor just inside the door, and stuck my arm and hand with the food on out the door, in clear view from her food dish. It took a few days of this dinner time routine, but soon she was licking the food off my fingers with no problem. Next, I brought her food bowl out to the porch, and instead of leaving, sat near her while she ate. She quickly made the connection that the big scary human also meant delicious food. She was wary, but her hunger was stronger than her fear. She was fairly unremarkable in appearance. Her short, smooth coat was white with patches of charcoal gray that was almost black. Her face was mostly white, but she had a dark spot above one eye and around one ear. Her back was all dark gray except for her one unusual marking, a small patch of white shaped like an arrowhead in the middle of her spine. One day, as she had her nose buried deep in her bowl, I reached over and ran my hand along her back. She startled but didn't bolt. I continued to pet her and talk to her while she finished her food. We had made definite progress, but this was where it stopped. She let me sit near her and pet her during meals. She would even come up on the porch and hang around if I was sitting on a chair reading. But she wouldn't come inside and wouldn't let me pick her up or hold her. We'd hit a wall, and she wouldn't go an inch further. Still, we had a connection. If I left to run errands, and as soon as my car pulled into the drive, my standoffish cat would come running to greet me. I decided to name her Moki after the Moki Dugway, a spectacular stretch of road that winds through the red rocks and desert of southern Utah. Something about the arrowhead on her back seemed to resonate with that area. For the next few months, whenever I went back to Tucson, I paid Jessica, a neighbor's daughter, to put food out for Moki while I was gone. Jessica told me Moki ate her food but wouldn't let Jessica near her. She reserved that privilege for me. And so our pattern continued. Every time I pulled into the drive that summer and fall, Moki seemed to sense my presence and come running. Then one October afternoon I pulled in, but Moki didn't come. I was uneasy, but not alarmed. Perhaps she was off hunting. A little while later, Jessica's mother knocked on my door. "I have some bad news," she told me. One evening, my neighbor explained, when Jessica came over to put food out for Moki, somehow the family dog got out of the yard and followed Jessica over to my house. Moki was waiting near the woodpile for her dinner when the dog came up behind her and attacked her. Jessica screamed at him to stop, but the dog shook Moki violently before Jessica could reach them. A moment later, the dog dropped the cat and Moki took off bloody and injured. She didn't know where Moki was or how she was, but she wasn't hopeful about an injured cat's chances in the predator-filled woods around our house. I immediately jumped into the car and went looking along the woods by the road. I called and called, but heard and saw nothing. Moki, if she was alive, was long gone. That visit I spent part of every day searching for Moki. All that I found was some fur by the woodpile, a horrible reminder of what had occurred. Deeply saddened, I left Flagstaff a week later, sure I'd seen the last of Moki. Winter passed, and I made 1 or 2 trips to Flagstaff to work on the cabin. There was never any sign of Moki. I was surprised at the pain I felt at the loss of this cat who had kept such an unbending boundary between us. I put the memory of Moki in a compartment in my heart and tried to forget about her. When May rolled around again, I made another trip to Flagstaff to put the finishing touches on the cabin where I hoped Gail and I would spend some time together that summer. Late one afternoon, as I was working inside with the door open to let in the spring breeze, I heard it. A faint meow. I dropped what I was doing and ran outside. There she was, coming towards me as fast as she could, on 3 legs. Her 4th leg was still there, but she wouldn't put any weight on it. I knelt down and pet Moki gently so I wouldn't frighten her, but I was so happy to see her. I found myself picking her up and holding her close to me. She didn't struggle. Instead, she purred loudly as I carried her inside. I called Gail to share the good news. She thought I should get Moki to a vet as soon as possible. That night, Moki slept with me without ever leaving the bed. The next morning, I took her to the vet. He x-rayed the leg and said that it had been broken and knitted badly, but he didn't recommend putting through the trauma of resetting it. He felt that in time, once the leg was fully healed, she would begin using it again. I asked the vet to spay her and give her shots and warming medicines. The following day, when I picked her up at the vet's office, Moki snuggled in my arms as if she had always done so. The wall between us had disappeared. Moki and I have remained close. In fact, there haven't been very many occasions over the last 8 years where we are apart. She even travels with us on vacations. I don't know how she survived that snowy winter alone and injured out in the cold, but I'm glad she did. I don't know which one of us was happier at our reunion today. I can't tell you which one of us is more attached to the other. Gail says that Moki looks at me with Nancy Reagan eyes. Moki is clearly my cat, and I am clearly her person. And life is sweeter because of it. You just never know where a conversation where a cat might lead you. This story was by Hoyt Tarola. The next story is entitled, Always Room for One More. One day last spring, we were driving home from a Saturday afternoon shopping trip. It was 4:30, peak traffic time on the major 4-lane road through town. I was tired and gazing without focus at the shops and houses passing by. My husband, Fred, who was driving, suddenly said in an outraged voice, "What was that?" "What?" I asked, suddenly alert. He yelled, looked to our right, and said, "It's a kitten." He had seen a small fuzzy ball tossed from the right side window of the car in front of us. Too stunned to take note of the car's license plate, Fred swerved into the first available driveway, put the car in park, and ran back to where he had seen the kitten land by the curb. I sat in the car imagining the worst. What chance would a kitten have in that kind of traffic? A few minutes later, Fred returned and handed me an 8-week-old white bundle of fur with orange stripes behind each ear and an orange rump. The kitten was trembling and looked dazed, but did not seem injured. Then I noticed he was missing his tail. Oh no, I thought, he's been run over. Looking more closely, I saw that he had been born that way. He's part Manx, I said. I held him close to me, petting him and talking in soft tones. Turning to Fred, I said, "Now what?" We already had long-term housemates, 2 adult cats in their early teens. At Christmas, we had added a young part Persian stray who had been hanging around the antique mall where Fred worked. It had taken 3 months for the resident cats and newcomer, Pooh, to get accustomed to each other. Now we were bringing home another? And to a house not much larger than a 2-bedroom apartment? Fred said, "Let's just take him home and get him calmed down. On Monday, I'll take him to the pet grooming shop." The woman who ran the shop had a soft spot in her heart for strays and took them in until we could find homes for them. We snuck the kitten into the house and put him in one of the small bedrooms along with food, water, kitty litter, and an old towel to sleep on. It didn't take long for the other cats to discover the interloper. One by one, they planted themselves in front of the closed door, demanding silently to know what was going on. Squeak, the dominant older cat, was clearly dismayed and gave me glowering looks every time I walked by the bedroom door. She wanted me to know that there was simply no more room in the house or in his heart to accept another cat. "It's okay, old man," I said, leaning over to stroke his silky head. "We are only keeping him for the weekend." By Sunday, the kitten had gotten comfortable with his new arrangement and was looking for entertainment. I found myself checking on him frequently, petting him and dangling a string for him to attack. When I picked him up to hold him, he purred intently and rubbed his nose affectionately on mine. "Don't get too attached," Fred warned. "No problem," I said. I can't manage another cats. 2 cats seem easy. 2 cats to locate, 2 dishes to wash, 2 cats to brush and medicate when needed, 8 paws of nails worth to trim. 2 cats who sometimes shared the bed at night. Then the 3rd arrived. Suddenly my morning routine was overturned. Where was each cat? Who had been fed and who hadn't? Why was I always running out of clean dishes? While the older one slept, the young one wanted me to come and play. Life had gotten a lot busier with the addition of just one. I couldn't imagine adding a 4th. Sunday night, Fred and I reassured one another of our decision not to keep him. "It will be too hard on the other cats," I said. "They are already stressed by Pooh." "Yes," he agreed. "And there's the added expense of cat food and vet care. 3 cats were quite enough," we concluded. Monday morning, I said goodbye to the kitten and left for work. As I drove away, I thought about the fact that the tiny face with the huge amber eyes would not be there when I got home. I started to cry. "Stop that," I admonished myself out loud. "You can't take in every stray who comes your way." Still, I could not shake the heaviness from my heart. I fretted all morning, couldn't focus on my work. I found myself wanting to call Fred and tell him to forget taking the kitten to the pet shop. Each time I reached for the phone, however, the prior night's words of reason stopped me. That night I arrived home to find that the kitten was gone, safely ensconced in a cage at the grooming shop, according to Fred. I felt like a traitor. "He trusted us," I said despondently, "and now he sits alone in a cage. How frightened he must be. Who knows if anyone will adopt him or how long it will take?" Fred didn't respond and was uncharacteristically quiet all evening. My mood was no lighter the next morning. I could think of nothing but the kitten. By mid-afternoon I had made a decision. I called home and said to Fred, "Go get the kitten. How much work is one more anyway?" "No need," Fred replied. "He's right here in my lap." I couldn't stand it, so I went back and got him this morning. He had given the shop owner a donation to help him with the other stray cats, thanked her, and told her we had decided to keep him. She had smiled and said, "It doesn't surprise me." "We are nuts," I said. "I know," he responded, laughing. Skeeter is now a happily established member of the family. Yes, there was a period of adjustment for both cats and humans. Squeak still reminds him with an occasional cuff to the head that Squeak is the boss cat and has full ownership of the new cat bed. Pooh, at first cautious, is now delighted to have a playmate to chase around the yard. Shadow, the elder cat, has become the surrogate mother, giving the kitten long, loving licks. They often sleep together, Shadow's front paw cuddling the kitten. Somehow my routine has adjusted itself, or I've adjusted to it. The cats have their own feeding schedule, so that there are never more than 2 of them in our tiny kitchen at one time. They seem to understand the 2 cats on the bed at one time rule, and they rotate occupancy. Skeeter has established an evening ritual of racing first to Fred's lap and then to mine to give each of us an affectionate glad your mind bus on the nose. All of new life brings teachings or reminders of past lessons lost. In this case, I reminded that even when the head says impossible, the heart can always find room for one more. This story was by Roberta Lockwood. The next story is called Panther and the Pigeons. Panther wasn't the kind of cat who would cuddle up in your lap and purr. She was feral. Her name suited her. A beautiful black cat with piercing green eyes, she roamed and in her own way ruled the neighborhood. Shunning people, she strutted as if she owned the block. Other cats gave her room. Panther showed no mercy to birds or mice and didn't run from dogs either. She had been known to fly out of nowhere at unsuspecting dogs, then take off in a black flash. She had everything under control in her territory, except for Artie's backyard. In Artie's yard, there was a pigeon coop that stymied her. Panther's pride could not allow this. She eyed the coop up and down, but hadn't been able to enter it. Panther's big obstacle was Artie. He secured the coop with 2 latches and was always on the lookout, thwarting her plans. Sometimes he would chase her out of the yard, but he couldn't keep her away. Panther would wait until he was gone, then slink back to circle the coop again and again and again. At first sign of Artie, though, she took off. One morning, as Artie walked across the yard, Panther darted by in her usual flash of black, then disappeared. Only this time, he saw that she had darted from inside the coop, exiting through a small hole in the mesh. Artie was afraid to look. How many birds had she killed or maimed? Cursing the cat, he slowly looked inside the coop. The birds were all there, alive and unhurt. They weren't even in the state of frenzy he had expected. They seemed unusually calm. Artie was puzzled. Well, he thought, perhaps he had gotten there just in time, before Panther had a chance to attack. Then something caught his eye. Over in the far corner, he found 3 newborn kittens. Panther had chosen the coop as the safest place to deliver her to deliver her litter. Now Artie was in a quandary. Should he move the kittens? She hadn't touched the birds, but would she in the future? He decided to wait out of sight and watch what Panther did when she returned. Sure enough, when the cat came back, she entered the coop. He listened but heard nothing. As quietly as possible, he crept forward towards the coop. When he got close, he caught her by surprise. She was only nursing her kittens and gave him a frightened look. He felt the appeal in her eyes. So Artie made a deal with Panther. She could stay there, and he would even feed her while she was nursing, but under no circumstances was she ever to touch his birds, not now or any time in the future. A breach of contract would not be tolerated. Somehow it seems as if she understood and accepted his offer. The birds did not like the idea at first. They fluttered a little uncomfortably whenever Panther entered the coop. However, in time, they got used to the new living arrangement. Then, on one particularly cold and nasty day, Artie walked over to the coop and looked in. Incredulous, he blinked his eye to make sure that the screen in front of him was not real. Panther wasn't there. Instead, one of the pigeons was actually sitting on the kittens to keep them warm. Motherhood did not calm Panther down. After the kittens were weaned and gone, she continued to terrorize the neighborhood, with one exception. She purred for Artie and never ever touched his pigeons. This story was by Barbara Vital. The next story is called Trash Picking Kitty. When I adopted a kitten from the local animal shelter, I knew I was in for a real test of my patience. I had raised 2 other cats, big boys now, and felt sure I was ready for the chaos a new kitten would bring back into my life and my heart. I did all the right things, like buying top brand expensive cat food, a big soft bed, and all the best cat toys imaginable. But I soon began to notice that this playful and demanding little being named Lucy had her own ideas of what was best for her. She only wanted table scraps. She would rather sleep on my bed than hers. And she scoffed at her store-bought toys. She preferred to amuse herself for hours by stealing balls of paper out of my office wastebasket. As a writer, I often tried to discourage her from bothering me when I was in my office working, but try as I might, she would sneak in and overturn the trash can, running off with a mouthful of my old notes and tossed off ideas. I would yell at her, scold her, try to encourage her to play with her real toys, the ones that cost me an arm and a leg, but I could not change her. My patience was wearing thin. Determined to turn her into a good little kitten, I started locking Lucy out of the office when I was working, only to find her sitting outside the door with big, sad eyes when I came out for a breather. Sometimes she would dart in between my feet and go straight for the trash can before I even knew what was happening. Then I'd raise my voice and lightly tap her rump, causing her to drop the wad of paper in her mouth and slink off into a corner. I hated to scold her, but she had to stop. The tables were about to be turned. Not long thereafter, I realized I had accidentally thrown away a great and very timely story idea, along with the magazine editor's name and contact number given to me by a supportive writer friend. Frantically, I searched through my half-full trash can only to realize I had emptied it, and the story idea the day before in time for the trash pickup. Defeated, I struggled to remember what I could of the idea I had fleshed out and figured I could always call my friend, until I realized she was in Europe for 2 weeks vacation. I doubted she had the magazine editor's name and phone number with her on her travels. Resigned to the fact that I would lose the lead completely or get the info I needed only after someone else had probably covered the story, I resolved never to write ideas on scraps of paper again. Instead, I would type and save them on my computer immediately. I sat there thinking about all the ideas and notes I had probably tossed out prematurely or accidentally when I heard a sniffing, rooting sound and turned around to find Lucy pulling out a wad of paper from my trash can. I went ballistic, chasing her out of the room and up the stairs to her cozy little corner, where I noticed a handful of other balls of paper on the floor. She hid under a chair and watched me as I picked up the scraps, swearing under my breath. But then I stopped dead, as I noticed one particular paper ball with my handwriting on it. As I unfolded it, I shook my head in disbelief. It was my story idea and the magazine editor's number and name. I grabbed Lucy out from under the chair and hugged her tight, smooching her and praising her. She looked at me in total shock and then snuggled her little kitten nose into my chest. I hope that meant she forgave all of my impatience and rude behavior. For in that instant, I knew that a trash-picking kitten is the best kitten a writer could ever have. No more would I try to change her or scold her for being herself. I love Lucy, just the way she is. And this last story was by Marie D. Jones. I hope you have enjoyed my little audiobook series of A Taste of Chicken Soup for the Soul. Thank you for your time. Please like and subscribe. Have an awesome day. Bye.